Hi, I'm Allie.
And I'm Becky.
We are registered dietitians that are passionate about using food as medicine.
In today's video, we are going to be talking about this guy, liver. So if you are intimidated by liver or you've never cooked it before, listen up. We are going to cover it all, including nutrient density of liver and some of the other benefits, the myths and kind of busting some of those, and making grass-fed meatballs with liver.
So why would you eat liver in the first place? Isn't it gross? Well, the answer is, first off, liver is a nutritional powerhouse. So if we think with ancestral patterns of eating, vital organs were often the most prized. And if we look at the animal kingdom, when an animal kills another animal, the first thing that's actually consumed is those vital organs, because that's where the nutritional powerhouse lives. Meat would be eaten as the secondary tissue, or the muscle fibers, if you will. When we look at liver specifically, we see a big boost of B vitamins, namely B12 and folate. These are really important for pregnant women, for fetal neural tube development, so helping with baby's brain and spine connection, as well as cognitive performance. In fact, we've seen moms that have B12 deficiency to have unfavorable outcomes at birth with their babies and their development. We also know that B vitamins play a big role with stress regulation, aiding in neurotransmitter support. We know that B vitamins also aid in metabolism and energy. Also, liver is a great form of CoQ10. This is a nutrient that aids in the electron transport chain in the mitochondria, so the energy factories of all of the cells in our body, helping with cardiovascular function as well as energy productivity. We know that liver is a great form of iron, and it's a lean protein. So a lot of benefits in the nutrient department. We also know that liver can be really economical because a lot of people don't go for it. So often you'll have to actually request from your butcher or at your farmer's market, or it might be frozen in your natural food section. So when you're looking at grass-fed, pasture-raised meats, you can get a high amount of liver purchased at a low price point. And the third thing to consider with liver is that it is a way to honor the entire animal in this snout to tail philosophy. So eating snout to tail means that we're consuming all of the parts of the animal, really honoring its life cycle. We know beyond this being an energetic support, also a humane approach to consuming or honoring that whole animal's life, that you're also supporting your nutritional balance, because when you eat too much muscle fibers, you can actually get a buildup of the amino acid methionine. But when you incorporate this snout to tail and you're eating the bones in bone broth or the hide of the animal in collagen peptides and the organs, you're gonna get a nice balance with the glycine, and that's gonna balance out your methylation in the body, which is really important for regulating inflammation.
Lots of reasons to consume liver, and it's kind of nature's multivitamin, if you will. Let's cover some of the common myths, starting with, isn't liver like toxic?
Right. So it is important. The liver organ does filter toxins in the body, but as I mentioned, the liver is really lean. So when we're concerned about toxicity in our animal consumption, we think of bioaccumulation, and we know that toxins are actually stored in the fat. So we'd be more concerned about toxicity of an animal that's maybe a confined animal farmed, not grass-fed, pasture-raised, so more of those conventional proteins. But really the higher concern of those types of animals would be the higher fat cuts or the dairy from those animals, where you're gonna get a lot more of that hormonal inflammatory effect. So liver, I would say, would be a good choice across the board because of that leanness, but I would still recommend grass-fed, pasture-raised as the gold standard.
Absolutely. So if the animal hasn't had to filter a lot of toxins from either prophylactic antibiotics or toxin in their feed or environment, they're going to have a much healthier liver to start with.
Sure.
And then I think another common myth that we get is, isn't liver really high in vitamin A, especially in the prenatal world? I think women, mamas, worry about getting too much vitamin A.
Yes, so it is that retinoic, which is the bioavailable animal-derived form of vitamin A. But vitamin A has really important influence on eye health, on immune health, and so much more that it actually is a nutritional powerhouse and a necessity in our diet. Liver, luckily, is kind of a self-limiting food. You're not gonna binge or gorge on high amounts of liver. In fact, we generally recommend incorporating it a couple times a month in the form of a blend. So in this recipe, for example, we're using a whole pound of grass-fed ground beef, and then we're gonna incorporate about a quarter pound of that grass-fed liver. So really like a 1-to-4 ratio. So even each meatball is going to have a little boost to that powerhouse, but not driving toxicity of vitamin A.
Okay, and then the last thing that we get, liver is really metallic and just doesn't taste good.
So there's a couple things you can do. Again, another reason why we're blending this in with grass-fed ground beef at a lower ratio. As you get more adept to, yes, there is somewhat of a metallic flavor profile in liver. As you get adept to that, you could work up to a 1/2-to-1/2 ratio or make the meatballs with just pure organs alone. But this is a great stair-step approach. We also add in a lot of fresh flavor. So we're adding in tomato paste to get that umami glutamic acid to help to round out the flavor profile. We're adding in onions and garlic for more detox support, but also that allium-rich, robust flavor, as well as fresh herbs and seasonings.
Yeah, definitely helps. And then if you really don't like the taste of liver, you can actually soak it in either lemon juice, milk, or buttermilk to kind of reduce some of that metallic taste and make it a little bit more tender as well.
Yeah, so let's get into the meatballs.
All right, let's do it.
All right. So we're gonna actually first start with a clean snout to tail form of a panko, if you will. So we're going to be making pork rind breadcrumbs, or an alternate to a breadcrumb from pork rinds. So these are epic pork rinds. The only ingredient is gonna be pork skins, salt, and pink Himalayan salt and sea salt. So I'm taking 4 cups of the Himalayan salt pork rinds, and I'm just going to pulse these in the food processor until we get a nice little texture. So we have a pretty great texture here, you can see. This is nice and crumbly. And we'll see what this yields, just so y'all know at home. Kind of pop that back
Something
in.
like this could even be used on like a really nice chicken tender or breadcrumbs for breading on fish or something like that.
Yes. All right, so we'll still use the same base, no need to clean that out. And now we're gonna pulse in the onions, garlic. So this is 1/2 of a red onion, 3 cloves of garlic that I've already kind of pre-chopped, but we'll just run them to get them nice and minced. And then we have a total of a 1/3 cup of fresh chopped herbs. And this is a combination of fresh thyme, basil, and parsley here. All right, so now we're looking like a nice, fresh green and onion and garlic blend. Now we're gonna go ahead and add in the liver, but first I'll run it through a fine chop, I'm thinking, to break it into some manageable chunks.
I think so.
All right, so I've just worked up this really rough chop, about like 1-inch pieces here. So I'm gonna plop these in here, and then I will pulse these in. Keep it kind of rough there. Now we're gonna add in everything else. So here's where we're looking with everything but the breadcrumbs in. And the breadcrumbs, or the pork rind crumbs, are going to also take out a little bit of that moisture and make a nice texture. Now it's time to scoop some meatballs. All right, so I'm just using this scoop here, and we have the oven preheated at 375. And I laid down some parchment paper, and then I will spray some avocado oil on top because the liver is so lean, just to give it some of that fat help with a nice glisten and texture while it's baking.
So we went ahead and baked these at 375 for about 15 to 18 minutes, kind of checking in there for doneness. These are pretty small, so you want to watch that they don't get overcooked. I will say that I personally do a little bit of a shortcut on this recipe, and I can actually get an ancestral blend from the local farmers market that already has beef liver, kidney, and I think heart blended into it. So in that case, I would just use that as the ground base, still pulse the pork rinds and the herbs in the food processor, but I wouldn't go ahead and pulse the meat in there because it's already a ground texture. So I would just kind of hand mix that in with the egg in the bowl and go from there.
And if you wanted more of that kind of bitey ground meat, also in this version where you are using the food processor to pulse the liver, you could then hand mix in that pound of ground meat so that you get a little bit more of a dense texture.
Yes, and then another way to kind of camouflage the organ flavor, especially for little kiddos or maybe a husband that you're sneaking this to, would be to add some form of a sauce or a dip. So like a really nice bright pesto or chimichurri. We could do a marinara sauce, like a clean marinara, like the Rouse brand goes a really long way with this dish.
Absolutely. Anytime you can add more acid and brightness of flavor, that helps to counterpart that metallic or gamey flavor of an organ blend. And then on its own, this is a really good nutrient-dense food to even start off as early first foods with babies when we talk about concepts like baby-led weaning. I know you're not even 8-month-old is eating organ meatballs.
He's digging them, crushing them, prefers it over fruit. And we really started that, like right at 7.5 months. A recipe very similar to this, and he's taken to it like that. So.
And it's always best if you can kind of harness your child's palate right away with savory, because then you don't have to unlearn those hyper palatable sweet flavor profiles. And he probably doesn't need a sauce, whereas someone like my picky husband does.
Yep.
And then my almost 5-year-old is kind of somewhere in the middle. So we hope that y'all enjoy this organ meatball blend and have learned a couple benefits of why you should incorporate organs into your diet. Leave a comment below on where you fall on the spectrum of needing sauce or dip or flavor enhancers, or maybe you've tried our raw liver pills or even the epic dried liver bites. Make sure you subscribe to the Naturally Nourished YouTube channel, and that's where you can stay on top of all of our food as medicine tips and tricks.
We are going to be talking about this guy, liver.
Watch out, girlfriend.
Oh my God.